Hey guys, welcome to the Liberal Hive Mind. We've got some leftist stupidity to get into today. Emotion, race baiting, race grifting, and anecdotes. Those are essentially the pillars of leftist ideology. How do I know this, you may ask? Well, because those are the common denominators that we see repeatedly each and every single time. Friends, I got an example to show you guys today. Two unhinged, raging feminists getting real triggered over the whole Claudine Gay thing. And of course, as expected, a bunch of trash arguments, a whole lot of emotion, a whole lot of anecdotes, simply a refusal to accept basic reality. Let me show you guys exactly what happened during this CNN debate. Let's take a look, have a conversation. We got some stuff to get into, so let's roll the tape. All right, folks, so obviously we're all up to date with the whole Claudine Gay situation. If you're not, real quick TLDR, Claudine Gay was the president of Harvard, a black woman of Haitian descent, who said a couple really dumb things during a House testimony. It then, of course, backfired on her, put the spotlight on her. Then it turned out that she was a hardcore plagiarist. You know, not exactly a great look if you're the president of Harvard. Eventually, after immense pressure from multiple different groups, Claudine Gay then resigned, and now, apparently, according to leftist feminists, the whole story can be summarized as being motivated by racial animus and hate. If she was a white man, this would have never happened.
Either way you look at it. I mean, what infuriates me is you look at the whole Claudine Gay thing, and everyone's talking about DEI. This woman cannot win or lose either. If she is there,
I'm happy to talk about
no,
Claudine
let me finish.
Gay.
Let me finish. If she's there, it's because of DEI, that they put her there because she's black. If she loses and they kick her out, it's because she actually was never good enough to be there in the beginning, and she was. You can't win in this situation, and it is infuriating as a person of color to constantly have this cudgel put on our.
I get the argument you can't win, but you also can't have it both ways. You can't celebrate and tout that someone was hired, and it's a wonderful thing to expand diversity, and Harvard went full tilt talking about how great it was to hire the first black woman, and then say all of a sudden...
The first black person. It wasn't even the first black woman. It was the first black person.
I don't care. The point is that she got caught obviously plagiarizing, and those are the facts that, you know, there's this massive...
This was an ideological, very well-funded...
The motives of the attack don't change the fact that she plagiarized. And where I disagree with you, Kara, is when you say...
When somebody fails who's white and who's a man... Let me finish.
You mean like the
when someone who
president
fails... yes. When someone... Nobody... In fact, there's books written about this. Fail and then come back. Look at Pivot. Exactly. Pivot. Nice way to get in your podcast. Pivot. And then when a person of color fails, all of a sudden it's an indictment of an entire system that the right doesn't like.
This is so ridiculous. She was a graduate of Exeter and Stanford with a PhD from Harvard.
And you know why?
Second generation Haitian American who came from a family that dominated the concrete industry in Haiti. She was not the wretched of the earth. She was someone who should be judged on her merits.
And
her chief qualification. Absolutely not. But she was selected because she established the Office of Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Belonging at Harvard. She presided over a steep decline in the free speech climate. And she also targeted minority professors who dissented from her perspective. That was a problem. She was a person with ideas, not someone who belongs to a demographic category.
One thing that strikes a lot of women and people of color a lot, it seems like standards are only applied when it comes to women and people of color. I have seen so many incompetent men on boards of internet companies, and they always talk about, well, we're going to bring on a woman to be more diverse, when they have basically driven a company into a wall.
Do you remember Ruth Simmons, the president of Brown University?
We never use the word standards with white men. We just don't.
And my colleague who, look, this was not a concerted campaign out of whole cloth. This was based on ideological predilections. Yes. This was based on the fact that she was entrenching certain ideas. She was someone who was actually doing great damage to an important American institution.
In your opinion.
And what he was trying to do was surface the hypocrisy. You know, the idea that we are defending free speech when, in fact, free speech, Harvard literally ranked dead last among research universities in the country on the speech climate.
Women, black people, Latinos, we're always the ones who have to sit here and say, you know what? It's exactly right. When we make a mistake, we have to wear the cloak of shame and say we never deserve to be here to begin with. And I'll say something else. And I just want to say this last thing when we're talking about DEI, which is, there was this big push in 2020 thinking, okay, here we are. We've had a big racial reckoning. And you know what happened? All these DEI offices that were created, 75% of them were led by white men.
In any
and that's
case,
all I have to say about that.
I would recommend reading Mark Cuban on this because he really is smart. He's talking about building a business that's diverse for the future.
I got no
and to do
with
these
diverse
little tweets about
so how do we get
racism
there?
Is not useful.
You can't fight. Look,
You can
my problem
legislate
with DEI is it's illiberal, right? It's speech policing. Claudine Gay got attention because she couldn't figure out how to speak clearly and with moral seriousness about anti-Semitism while she's talking about DEI, right? She says, well, except for the stuff about Jewish genocide, we believe in all of these other things. That's what got the attention to her, and she would still be there today if she wasn't a plagiarist.
Well,
that's the fact.
I am glad we settled this. Let's lighten things up here a little.
It's horrible argument after horrible argument. It's kind of interesting because I learned a bunch of new things about Claudine Gay. I mean, forgive me if I'm not super interested in this story, more so just following the discussion around it, but I'm learning that apparently she comes from a very wealthy family in Haiti. That little bit of information alone kind of destroys the whole leftist narrative that somehow someone like Claudine Gay is underprivileged and therefore DEI initiatives or affirmative action is necessary. The assumption is that the individual is underprivileged and needs a bump purely because of their skin tone, even if that person's actual reality, their actual upbringing, is one of extreme privilege and wealth. That's why these programs don't work. That's why they're inherently discriminatory. Someone like Claudine Gay automatically gets prioritized over another possibly equally qualified or even more qualified candidate simply because of the color of her skin. The fact that people can't see how that's a bad thing is a little bit shocking to me, but then of course they reveal their true colors. What it really is not diversity, equity, and inclusion. It's not compassion. It's not undoing previous wrongs. No, the logic is white people bad, let's take things away from them. And of course, sprinkle in a little bit of cultural Marxism. Another great point that was made during this panel, the whole notion of DEI programs leading to greater diversity is a complete scam. Maybe visual diversity, but when it comes to diversity of thought, absolutely not. Of course, we know the most important criteria is kowtowing to leftist culture and dogma. In other words, token representation in one big virtue signaling scam, but of course, as we know, you better toe the line or else. The claim is that these programs are needed to give access of opportunity to minority individuals, but what they mean by that is minority leftists who play a part in pushing the narrative forward. That isn't diversity. That's the exact opposite. That's discrimination. That's called being part of a cult. We're absolutely horrible across the board. The first argument, of course, is vicious race grifting and using a random, unspecific BS anecdote to make the argument. I've been in environments where white men are completely incompetent and they're in positions of power. Yeah, there's incompetent people in all kinds of positions of power. Like, what's the point? What's the implication here? That white people just automatically walk into privileged positions without having to actually perform at the job? Completely ludicrous. I mean, maybe in government, but in the private sector, yeah, that's not how it works. And anybody with 2 working brain cells and maybe a couple years of experience understands that. I saw a white guy and I thought he was stupid, therefore we need DEI. That's literally not an argument. Then of course they go on and make the claim that Claudine Gay is only receiving backlash because of the color of her skin. If she was white, it would have never happened. No, Claudine Gay decided to go testify in front of Congress. She said something incredibly stupid, which then of course put a spotlight on her. Then it turned out that there were some groups with vested interests, namely Jewish lobbyist groups led by Bill Ackman, who were offended by her comments, viewing them as anti-Semitic, and so they thought, let's start a campaign, let's look into her past. They found a bunch of dirt, and then of course, unfortunate for Claudine Gay, it caught up to her and she was forced to resign. A statement made towards the end of the panel discussion I thought was probably the only thing that needed to be said. I think the conversation should end right there. If she hadn't had an extensive history of plagiarism, she'd still be the president of Harvard. In fact, Harvard tried very very hard to sweep this one under the rug and to keep her in that position, but her history of plagiarism was simply too egregious to look over, and then of course compounding that on top of what she said in front of Congress, not exactly a good look, not a good look for her, not a good look for the university, and so they had to make a decision. Race isn't even a factor. It's only a factor if you want it to be. It's only a factor if you have some sort of dishonest race grifting narrative to push. Oh, and another point that I'd like to touch on before ending this video, this moment right over here.
This woman cannot win or lose either. If she is there,
I'm happy to talk about.
No, let me finish. Let me finish. If she's there, it's because of DEI, that they put her there because she's black. If she loses and they kick her out, it's because she actually was never good enough to be there in the beginning, and she was. You can't win in this situation, and it is infuriating as a person of color to constantly have this cudgel put on our head.
Another typical mistake we see from leftoids when attempting to debate. Lady, I don't think you're making the point that you think you're making. That's exactly the point. Affirmative action policies, DEI initiatives, are what create that doubt. That is the toxic element of these kinds of discriminatory policies. If there is literally a policy at universities that states we're going to lower testing standards and lower standards for individuals of particular groups in order to give those people a bump, putting them in lucrative positions that they did not earn, or in some cases that they're not qualified to be in, if that is the explicit goal of said policy, then obviously there's going to be a culture of undermining people of particular groups within prestigious academic positions or corporate positions, because that's exactly what the policies do. It has nothing to do with gender or race. It has everything to do with the ridiculous policies that leftists are implementing across government in the corporate world. It's really not a complicated conversation. I know academics will talk in circles for 50 minutes. They'll go on and on and on with all these fancy academic terms and all this data, but at the end of the day, I love to look at things from a more layman perspective. Affirmative action is not a meritocratic system. When you apply different standards for different groups of people, that is called discrimination. And when you do it based on race, that is called racial discrimination. Affirmative action is racial discrimination. It is wrong. It's not fixing historical wrongs. It's simply wronging individuals who dedicate their entire lives to academic pursuits and achievement. It's a system that wrongs hardworking people based on immutable characteristics on their last name, their nationality, or the color of their skin. It doesn't take 17 PhDs to understand that. It's just basic common sense. Anyways, you guys get it. The clip speaks for itself. Hopefully I added a little bit of value on top of that. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to leave a like and possibly subscribe to the channel. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.